thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fuad Kassab. Hello everyone, welcome to A Quirky Journey. I'm so excited about this week's podcast. We actually have part 1 and part 2 because we talked so long that it divided itself into 2 podcasts. We talked for 2 hours, but that's because it was just so fascinating. I think you're really going to get a lot out of this podcast. So I want to introduce you to my very good friend, Lucie McCullough, and she lives in the USA. She is kind of a citizen of the world, though, because she's lived just about everywhere. London, Milan, Rome, Paris, Hong Kong, all over. And she's gone through life facing all sorts of health issues, which partly came from her environment, and also partly genetics, as we often talk about. Genetics load the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger. So she has kindly come onto this podcast to tell us her story and to share with us lots and lots of great practical ideas for making your home a healthy sanctuary from the world. And that's what she does best. So Lucie is an interior designer. And not only does she design homes to be absolutely beautiful and comfortable and gorgeous, and when you see the photos of the homes that she's designed, you'll just be amazed. But it's not all about aesthetics. It's not all about, having a beautiful home. It's about having a home where you can hide away from the world and actually heal. And this has been very important in her family because of her health issues and her children. And she's needed to really have that kind of home where they can be safe from all sorts of toxins and the things that, we all have to cope with out in the everyday world. It's nice to have somewhere to go home and rest. And another exciting thing about this podcast is that it leads into our really big news, which is Lucie has invited myself and Elise to host a gut health retreat in her ski lodge in the Italian Alps. So as you can imagine, we are pretty excited. Lucie asked me about it last year, and of course my answer was immediately yes. Let's work this out, definitely. Lucie has a beautiful 350-year-old chalet up in the Alps near Piedmont, which is near Turin. And in the summer, it's just the most beautiful place to be because you're right on the edge of a national park that is full of medicinal herbs. There's local producers of cheeses and honey and all sorts of delicious, traditionally produced foods up there in the mountains. There's markets, there's truffle hunting, but not at that time of year, sadly. But I really want to go for the truffle hunting. It's an absolutely gorgeous place, and she has, she'll talk about this in the podcast, but she has completely redesigned the chalet to modernize it and still using all the traditional building techniques, and a local architect helped her with this. And it's a very restful place because it's completely free of the usual contaminants in homes, and it also is just a gorgeous, restful place to be because of where it is. So it's made out of stone. You've got to look at the photos. I'll put a link on the show notes, and it's amazing. So even the people that have stayed there, like Jamie Oliver and all these celebrities, just love it and have put really good reviews on it. Lucie has invited us to do a gut health retreat there, and we're super excited, as you can imagine. The retreat page will be up tomorrow. hopefully by the time this podcast has been released, and we'll have the link on the show notes, so go and have a look. In this podcast, we mostly talk about Lucie's journey towards better health and what she had to learn along the way, and how the effect of her environment, what that had on her living in a mouldy environment, suffering from all sorts of illnesses, and how she worked that out and what she did to improve her health, and also what she did to improve the health of her home. And she talks about studying building biology and things that she's learnt along the way. So red flags for when you are trying to figure out what's going on with your health and you can't figure it out. Red flags that show that it's something environmental. There's all sorts of tips for what kinds of materials to buy, to use in your home for decorating, what kinds of furniture, what kinds of paints. And she also just gives us lots of great advice on healthy living. So enjoy the podcast. Part 2 will be here the week later, the week after this one. And then we'll be all caught up and we'll get back to our usual fortnightly podcasts. Enjoy the podcast. Sorry for rambling on. I'm a bit excited if you can't tell. And I hope you have a lovely week. Welcome, Lucie. So good to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Jo.
Hello.
Hi, Elise.
Hello.
And Elise.
Lovely to be here.
My best buddy Elise is here too. It's going to be so fun hanging out with you guys in Italy. Oh, I'm jumping ahead. I can't help myself.
The end of the podcast.
We'll talk about that later. But first of all, let's talk about you, Lucie. So I've told you guys a little bit about Lucie in the intro, but Lucie, we'd love to hear your story and, you know, how you came to be interested in building biology and the health of our homes.
Sure. All right. I'll dive in. Excuse any lack of chronological order, and I may jump around a little bit, but I will do my very best. So I guess going back to the very beginning where it all begins, right? The start in life back in 1975, happened to be in the States despite my accent. And I would say potentially a little bit of a rough start. I wasn't breastfed because it was that time when, of course, you know, certainly here, mums were told not to bother. It was just a bit of a hassle. And it was also, you know, bang smack in the middle of the boom of all the processed foods. And so I was deemed to be lactose intolerant, which I think I found out later in life I'm absolutely not. But something was obviously not quite right. And I was put on one of those soy formulas, you know, laced with corn syrup and everything else that came out of the 70s. So anyway, you know, I've only looked back at that consequently to try and sort of put the pieces together and figure out what went wrong. But we, you know, progressed into teens and then ended up getting just repeat tonsil, what in England what we call tonsillitis. I think in America what they call probably strep, but some sort of throat infection, and ended up literally on antibiotics probably every 2 to 4 weeks. I went off to boarding school, came back for what we call, you know, the exeat, the long weekend, to be at my parents' house for the long weekend. And the minute I got back home, boom, got the tonsillitis. And really the only way to get back to school at that time was to, you know, take the antibiotics. And it was also a time when I don't think we really realized the damage that was being done. I certainly had absolutely no clue. My mum didn't have any clue that it was going to be having such an impact on my health and my gut. So fast forward sort of, I guess, 4 to 6 years, finished university, went through university in the typical style that any English girl would go through university. It was fun, put it that way.
What did you actually do at university?
Oh, I did. So yeah, good point. I studied French and Italian.
Okay.
That was my big love in life was languages. So went to the beautiful city of Bath in England and studied French and Italian and had a lot of fun. And then left. I did a year abroad we had to do half of it in France and half of it in Italy.
How amazing.
Had to, I know. And I chose Paris and Rome.
I chose the wrong subjects at uni.
Yeah, that's right.
I know. I have to say, I think languages was definitely. I had my eye on the prize.
Yeah.
So I went to. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to try. My two big passions in life at the time were fashion and antiques. And so I really wanted to try both. And I did have a job lined up in Paris in fashion that fell through. So I ended up sort of part-time working in Louvre des Antiquaires, which is one of the big antique places right in the center of Paris, which was fun. And then I remember going out to the pub the last night that I was in Paris, knowing that I had to go to Italy the next day and not knowing where the heck I was going to go and what I was going to do and where I was going to work. And I met an Italian girl who had grown up between England and Sardinia, whose sister was the head of Valentino press office. And I landed on my feet and I ended up working in the press office in Valentino in Rome, the head office, for 6 months whilst I was there. And then whilst I was there, I met a bunch of people that introduced me to the Ralph Lauren team up in Milan, and was very much called on to go to Milan. And I really wanted to go back and finish my studies. So I ended up saying, no, I'm not coming to Milan. I'm staying in Rome. I'm going back to Bath to finish my last year of university. I'm going to get graduated. I've got this far. I'm going to finish it off. And call me on the 23rd of June or whatever it is. That's when I graduate, if you still want me to come to Milan. And I got a call on the 23rd of June.
Wow, how about that?
So I ended up in Milan, and that was when, I will say, I had probably the most fun of my life, but where everything really started to go downhill after a couple of years. I was living by myself. I don't do too well living by myself. I was probably not eating very well. I was, in the thick of Milan fashion life. And I ended up from one day to the next, actually on a flight, and not the world's best flyer either, believe it or not, ended up having what I now know was a panic attack, but what at the time I thought was, of course, me dying, because that's what they felt like. Yeah. So yeah, that was sort of, I guess, probably mid-20s. And I just couldn't really figure it out. And I just, I came back to England, and I, temporarily, and I got worked up by the doctors for just everything. And I was told that I was, completely crazy. And I was told that maybe I had Parkinson's, and I was told all these different things. And, of course, there was no talk back then of gut or health or looking after your body, or how that could ever, play a part on what was going on in your brain. So I think my bucket just completely overfled, and ended up moving back to England, had about 5 or 6 months off. Then I actually got a job at Vogue in London. So had this wonderful experience of being in Vogue House in the center of London for a couple of years.
Wow.
And then we got moved to Hong Kong. I met my husband, or my husband to be, and we got moved to Hong Kong, where we lived for 10 years. Yeah, just short of 10 years.
That was for his work?
For his work, yeah, exactly. And I realized at that time that we got married, and we started to try and have babies, and I just ended up having one miscarriage after the next. And I came back to London again and got worked up for a whole load of things. And at that point, I realized that there was a bunch of things going on. I actually got directed to after I think my 8th or 9th miscarriage, I got directed to a clinic in Chicago by my wonderful OBGYN in Hong Kong, and they worked me up for all these genetic markers, and sure enough, the ones that you ladies will be very familiar with, the MTHFR and a bunch of other gene mutations came up, which just really inhibit detox. And obviously that life that I had lived up until that point needed some detoxing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't getting it. And funnily enough, consequently, I found out things like the house, the flats that we were living in Hong Kong were closest to the biggest cell tower on the whole of the island, and things like that, which, I didn't know anything about at the time. But anyway, I finally had a successful pregnancy with the help of this reproductive immunology team in Chicago. And then got pregnant again. And I was sitting in my flat in Hong Kong, about 4 months pregnant, and I was sneezing I don't think I'm exaggerating. I'd say probably 200 to 300 times a day. It was just non-stop. And I ended up in hospital because they kept on thinking that I was having pulmonary embolisms because I couldn't breathe. But all that was happening, I was sneezing so much that I was getting pulling little chest muscles, and it was, really restricting my breathing. So we made a decision halfway through the pregnancy to get the heck out, because we realized that I was reacting to something. And we were kind of on our way at that stage to either Europe. Well, we thought Europe. We have this beautiful ski lodge in the Italian Alps, and we wanted to be closer to that. But anyway, the long and short of it was that we ended up in a small little town outside Boston, where I have a vascular condition that I was born with, and the specialist is at Boston Children's. And so I wanted to sort of see through the rest of the pregnancy, having originally had a blood clot with the first pregnancy. I wanted to see it through in Boston. So we decided to move here with our 3 kids. We have adopted an adopted eldest daughter. With our 2.5 kids, I should say, 2 and 1 in the tummy. And so we arrived here, and all I knew at this stage is that I felt like a different person. I got out of the flat in Hong Kong, and I felt much, much better. And of course, I was living in fresh air, and Hong Kong is relatively polluted, as I'm sure you know. And so I really didn't know what it was. I didn't think that moving flats in Hong Kong was necessarily going to resolve it. So that wasn't really an option. I just needed to get somewhere completely different. I think, you have that mama instinct when you're pregnant, you need to run. And I just needed to escape. My poor husband was told from one day to the next, "We're ejecting." So we got here, and we found this house that we weren't really supposed to buy because we were supposed to rent. Fell in love with this house, and we're sort of sitting in this house, and 6 weeks later, the truck arrives on the driveway, and I'm sitting out the front at this stage, 8.5 months pregnant, and the back of the truck opens, and they start offloading the furniture, and I start sneezing again. Exact same aggressive, uncontrollable, I'm having a reaction to something, sneezing. And that was the first sign, really, that there was probably something heavily environmental in my environment in Hong Kong that was now on that truck, or had been spread onto that truck, through furniture. So the guys that were driving the truck got a lot of nice furniture.
Oh, wow.
Didn't bring any of it into the house.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of where I decided this beautiful English style house that we had fallen in love with needed a little renovation, because of course when you're 8 months pregnant in a high risk pregnancy, why would you not buy a house that you need to renovate?
Great plan.
But,
especially when we have a couple of kids, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we decided to embark on a renovation, and we all know what renovations are like, right? They snowball, they become things that you We didn't know, we didn't think we were going to be here for as long as we probably are. We knew that at one point we were going to have to sell the house, but at the same time, I really wanted to have fun doing it. I'd fallen, there you go. I missed a big part. I'd fallen from fashion into interior design in Hong Kong.
You forgot
what had happened in the 10 years in Hong Kong, alongside the miscarriages and the figuring out the health stuff. And loved interior design. But I remember thinking, going into these places, these, sort of penthouse units in Hong Kong, and literally ripping out a brand new kitchen and thinking, oh my God, why am I doing this? This is
because they wanted to change the style.
Yeah, they just wanted a different style. It was a new ownership, and therefore new. So I remember now that I'm working with so much more environmental conscience and just health, we'll get on to building biology in a minute, but I just remember, I look back now and I'm like, wow, that really disrupted my brain, that I was having to throw this amazing stuff that was probably also super toxic down a chute and back down into our lovely earth. So that was kind of how I realized, with the renovation that was going on here, I realized that I needed to figure out a way to make it healthy. And we were going to live in it. We were going to try and live in it. We didn't live in it the whole way through the renovation, but we were going to try and live in it, which is probably nothing I would ever recommend anyone should ever do. But
while renovating, you
live and learn, right? So we're still learning, but yeah, we got to the point where we needed an insulation for a certain area that we were renovating, and I was like, oh my God, all the insulation that I can see here is this spray foam insulation, and that's what's recommended to meet the energy standards and everything that you need. But these guys are coming in here in the full-on gas mask suits, so how healthy can this possibly be? So anyway, I ended up through people in the village, a woman that runs a lovely farm-to-table restaurant who, funnily enough, excuse me, has had her children on a mixture of GAPS and Western Aid Price for the last, I'd say 25 years.
Wow.
So I think we landed in a town in America with the only GAPS friendly restaurant, and this is when we were starting.
Well done.
How's that?
Unbelievable.
You better mention the name in case anyone travels there.
Yeah, it's called Woods Hill Table, and it's in Concord. We're in Concord, Massachusetts, which is a gorgeous little town where the start of the American Revolution was, actually. Ironically, it's full of English people because we tend to come back for more and annoy them. They got us out, and we keep them back.
Right. We'll show you. We'll take over again.
So she's got Woods Hill Table in Concord, which is this gorgeous little historical town that we live in. Beautiful. And then she's just opened Woods Hill Table, or Woods Hill at Pier 4 in the center of Boston, right on the water, which is gorgeous. And she opened you girls will love this. She opened a fast food, organic, Western Aid Price Mexican.
No. I think I'd fly there just for that.
Yeah,
honestly, I can't believe it.
Maybe we'll have to go to America for the Western A Price conference next year.
Good idea. Exactly.
She was the chapter leader for here for many years, and you may even know she released a documentary called Farmageddon.
Oh, wow! Did she do that one? Oh,
she did that. So Okay. So I'd say when we arrived alongside high-risk pregnancy, newborn, and renovation, we decided to start GAPS because we realized that
because you didn't have enough on your plate.
We didn't have enough on our plate, exactly. And so that first period of GAPS, it's kind of hard to go anywhere. So we didn't really go anywhere. But just as we got to the point where we could start to maybe think about eating out and trusting, other people's pans and stuff like that, she opened the restaurant within, 8
bless her.
So
maybe you should link us up with her too. We could do a podcast about the farm.
You absolutely should. You
That would be
should.
good.
Definitely, yeah. And she's just on fire. She's just opened these restaurants in quick succession.
Amazing.
Actually, she opened it together with, I know at the beginning, Hilary Boynton from the Heal Your Gut cookbook.
Okay.
She was involved in it because she's from Concord, or she lived in Concord for many years.
Okay.
She now lives over in Topanga in California, and is starting a lunch, or has started a lunch lady movement for good food in schools.
Well, that's good.
All Western Aid price stuff. Yeah. So anyway, Kristen from Woods Hill Table, I went to her and I was like, oh, I know you've done a sort of sustainable restaurant. You might know something about insulation and where I can figure this out, because I have no clue where to go. I wouldn't have even, in Hong Kong, I would have relied on a contractor, but I also didn't really have any concern about, all of this stuff at this stage, because it really had happened during that spring summer that we moved here, that I realized that there was, we were having big reactions to stuff. And she said to me, listen, I don't really know, but there's a lady down the road who runs the Natural Home Store. And I went to her and she was so super helpful. And she had all these incredible products. And I ended up using a lot of her suggestions. And she said to me, listen, you know what? I'm going to put you on to two designers, architects. And so I spoke to two of these. One of the designers was a local lady who had a daughter who also, because we had realized at this stage that Mimi was definitely reacting to something as well. And the sort of funny thing is, of course, is that she's adopted. So it really makes me think that we had some exposure, the two of us.
It wasn't just the genetics.
Not just the genetics, exactly. So the genetics probably didn't help. But and so I spoke to this lady, and she said, she gave me a little bit of advice. And then the next person I spoke to is a lady called Paula Baker Laporte, who is basically the main teacher at the Institute of Building Biology down in Santa Fe. And she gave me 15 minutes of, architect to designer free advice. And this is what you can do. And I was like, oh my God, this is a whole new world that I have to know more about before I embark on this. And Monday, the first course started and I was on a flight.
Had you had your baby by then?
Yeah, I'd had the baby by then. Yeah. Yeah, this was probably...
You and baby were off to do building biology.
Yeah, this was probably a year after he was born, yeah. I think it was when we were embarking on our second renovation. We'd done the first renovation. We'd done the first renovation using conventional standard stuff. That was sort of whilst he was being born. And then the second renovation, I was like, you know what, I can't get this. I just don't think I can afford to get this wrong. We're clearly sensitive, and I want to learn more about it. And I kept on going back to that thought in Hong Kong of, gosh, if there's Paula managed to absolutely sell building biology to me as the only movement that takes into consideration both ecology and occupant health. And I was like, this is perfect. This is the epitome of luxury. This is what I need to be doing. So that was how I ended up starting in the world of building biology. And as you know, once you know, you don't go back.
Yeah, you can't unlearn it then. And then suddenly you've got all these things to think of. Did you find it quite overwhelming at first?
Yeah, I think
I'm still at the overwhelmed stage.
I still go to, so I've been down to Santa Fe now 3 times, and I just got certified after 4.5 years.
Good on you. Well, you've got little ones, so wow.
Yeah, it is a long course. It's a very, very comprehensive course, which is good. So hopefully you should know what you're talking about at the end of it.
Yeah.
But I do remember leaving Santa Fe is such a gorgeous place, and it lends itself to learning about health and the environment. It's just a really wonderful place. But I do remember leaving thinking, oh my gosh, it's so much, and so many people are doing it wrong. Am I going to make any difference if I if it's just me doing it right. And so I, 4 years on, I'm sort of trying my hardest to get it out to the press as much as I can, and got a couple of stories coming out in Architectural Digest and a couple of other magazines. So I feel like the people that I've been speaking to recently and doing these magazine interviews with are really, really already a little bit knowledgeable about all of this, which is really surprising for me. So that's really reassuring that it's not,
that gives us
out there. Sorry, say again, Elise?
Yeah, that really gives me hope to, Yeah, because it can feel that overwhelm of like, well, so many people are doing it in this way, and how are we going to really change anything?
Exactly. So the more people that you speak to, every day it's like, oh, I just spoke to someone who didn't get it at all. And then you speak to someone who shocks you with a piece of information that they have that you're like, how do you even know that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that kind of, keeps you going.
And I think it's really a matter of planting the seed for a lot of people.
Yes. You might just be the first person they hear it from, and then they hear it somewhere else.
That's right. And you have to hear it over and over before it starts to sink in. I know it was like that for me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Both with gut health and with mold and with all these things. It's like, oh yeah, this doesn't really apply to me. Wait a minute, this does apply to me.
Yeah, go back.
When I'm trying to, I feel bad when I try and address mold with my clients sometimes, because I feel like I'm putting, it's like they're blissfully unaware. Yeah. Like I'm just like gonna
don't burst my bubble.
I know. That's what it feels like. I feel like really guilty. I'm like, well, and I'm like just gently burst the bubble for them. Really
like you did for me, Elise.
I did for you, yes. That it's like, okay, well, I think you need to look at this, and it's opening this massive door. So how do you tread with that with people, with kind of introducing them to this world of, well, actually, maybe your house is making you sick and all your belongings in it?
Yeah.
And how to then address that? I guess maybe there is no easy way.
Do you know what? I'm probably not the most diplomatic person.
I was about to say, Lucie probably just tells them.
I have a really good friend who keeps getting sick with pulmonary stuff, and I can smell mold on. I mean, this happens to me on a regular basis. Once you're super sensitive to it, you can't. You're compelled to help people as well. We're in this for a reason, right? We've got that character that we feel compelled to be out there to helping people. So ignoring it doesn't really help.
Not really.
So I do tend to just, kind of say, I think that if you're dealing with this health issue, you should really look into mold in the best way I possibly can.
Yeah.
And then it's up to them. And I think, as is the case, as you guys know, it's only when you really need to do it that you do it. It's not fun.
It's the same with health. It's the same with houses. It's when you get desperate enough, you go, okay, no matter how hard this is, I have to take a step in the direction.
Exactly.
To do something.
Yeah, exactly. And I know I've definitely been in the position of having my head in the sand about mold. Like it wasn't until after the fact of moving out of this place that I was in that I finally admitted to myself that mold was making myself and my son so sick. And we took a lot of our things with us, and then it's only been now that I got rid of all my very, very, very expensive bedding, $2,000 worth of bedding of organic wool mattresses and that kind of thing, and I've just replaced it all, and I'm in a new place that hasn't had any of that stuff in it, no furnishings that were ever in that mold place. I've really, took me to really come to terms with it and replace
it takes a long time. You've got to let go of a lot of your past, and that's not that's not always necessary at all, but yeah, I mean, I was reading something just couple days ago about a study that Dr. Klinghardt, the very well-known Lyme doctor. He did a study back in 2011 in Switzerland, which showed that he was doing it. It was basically trying to show whether electromagnetic fields, promote mold growth. So he had all these mold spores in his lab, and when it was exposed to the regular EMF in the lab, so the lab happened to be relatively near a cell tower, not right underneath one, but relatively near one. Then there was all the wireless stuff inside and people with their phones and whatnot. In comparison to when the mold was covered with, a protective shielding layer, the mold spores produce 600 times more biotoxins than were covered with the shielding material.
That's scary.
So it's not just one thing. This is the thing about building biology, and this is what I find so fascinating, and where it totally differs from any other green, healthy, wellness building movement, is that we're looking, I think, we're the only ones looking at the whole picture and how the things all work together. Because we're not just looking at, mold, we're not just looking at climate and energy and focusing just solely on energy saving. We're looking at all of this stuff together and trying to get, the right indoor air quality, the sanctuary, the place where you go to regenerate and allow your cells to do what they need to do at night to get you through the next day. Because let's face it, I mean, we all know this at this stage. I think this is pretty common knowledge that there's a lot out there. In the 70s or even maybe earlier, there was an introduction of 85,000 chemicals during that period. And the EPA has tested 300 of them.
Wow.
And I don't actually know off the top of my head how many of those 300 have gone out of circulation. But if you think about it now, bromine, which is used as the fire retardant in all is now
self-care products. It was used in like face creams and foods and conditioners, perfumes and
What is it actually for?
And flour in America, is it still?
The brominated flour, exactly. I learned that when I moved here. I was still busy happily eating bread, and one of the doctors, and this is a pretty standard doctor in a hospital, in an immunology clinic, said to me, "You've got MTHFR gene mutation. You can't detox folic acid and all the rest of the stuff that is put in the bread in America." And I was like, gosh. So I made sure that all the pastries I ate were made with Italian flour.
And Joe, bromine that comes into the iodine thing. It's like,
it does.
Bromine pushes your iodine out.
But I'm just wondering why they add it to bread. What does it do?
I think it's something to do with making it rise with bread. I'm not sure. I know for furniture it's a fire retardant.
Yeah.
It's a bit like ice cream with fire retardants in it and all that.
Exactly.
Oh, scary stuff.
So all of these things that we're constantly bombarded with during the day, at least when you get home to your place, you need to be able to, the concept is to try and allow your body to regenerate during that time.
So interesting. So could you give us a bit of an idea for our listeners, what kind of things you should look for to know if your house is making you sick, your environment, what are the red flags that you can think of?
Right. Well, I have to say, I'm obviously not the smartest person when it comes to this, because my husband said to me the other day, "Lucie, do you not remember that huge, gaping hole in the wall that was filled with black stuff in our flat in Hong Kong?" And I was like,
okay, that's a red flag.
So I guess that would be a red flag.
Sure.
And I was not prepared to even go there with any of that. But and as exactly what we said, it wasn't until I got really sick that I realized that I needed to do something and to wake up and listen to it. So I find that a hard one, to be honest, because I haven't. It's not like I've been through. I mean, I guess mine was pretty clear when I moved here, but I was so bamboozled with having a baby and moving continents, and
you're not sure what was the
I mean, thank goodness when that truck arrived and I started sneezing again, I was like, oh, hello, okay, this is a direct indicator. Well, you don't always get that direct indicator.
No, but this is something that Elise told me when I was wondering if we had mold issues. She said, "Do you feel better when you go away on a trip, and when you come back, do you start sneezing again?" And I'm like, yes.
Right.
And exactly. that was a big sign, and coughing, that dry cough.
I think we'd been away, and then you said, "Oh, I'm feeling like this." I'm like, "Joe, it's mold."
Yeah. Or alternatively, if you go somewhere and I went somewhere to do a photo shoot and I know the place has mold, I can smell it. I mean, I'm very sensitive to it now. And I don't think I ever was as sensitive to it.
Yeah,
But
same.
once it fills, you then become that canary in the coal mine. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I feel dreadful here. I'm so tired. I'm so, so, you know, that to me is a confirmation that I've definitely got, you know, some issue with mold, but it could be electromagnetic stuff. I mean, there's a lot, you know, there's a massive amount of research out there about how this bombardment of electromagnetic fields is having an effect on us. So it's hard to figure out what it could be, but I definitely agree. Being out of the house, feeling better out of your house, feeling better even, you know, just, I mean, nature, that's one of the big things about building biology is the study of, you know, biophilia and how we as humans are much happier in nature, which is why we try to use natural products and, you know, live in it, basically live in nature, make our houses out of nature. So yeah, I think if you've got a dead set sign like that, you're lucky. And you can work with it, you know, really effectively and quickly and jump on it. But for a lot of people, I think it's a, you know, it does end up being a longer journey. But I do think that there are so many things that you can do to instantly feel better. You know, as of today, listening to this podcast, that can help. Whether it's putting an air filter in, a really good air filter, whether it's just turning off your Wi-Fi at night, and you know, who's using the Wi-Fi at night at the end of the day. Let yourself, you know, give yourself the break by potentially changing out a few toxic pieces of furniture that you might have, particularly carpets. Carpets tend to be something that just harbor everything and anything you can. So yeah, I would say it's a hard one to figure it out. It's not always straightforward.
Do you have any suggestions, Elise, that you want to mention on red flags?
Well, as from a practitioner perspective, the way I would get to the point of suspecting something environmental, it is something I usually ask questions around that right from the start when I'm talking to a new client. And I kind of ask if anyone's heard of chronic inflammatory response syndrome or CIRS. That we kind of call that mold illness.
Right.
I ask the kind of general symptom questions of that, the matrix of symptoms that come along with that, just to get an idea, an indication if I'm suspecting it in any way. And I do ask questions like if they've been, you know, when you're out of your house, do you feel better? And it's kind of like when I'm looking at the picture of their health history, I find it's clear if they haven't had health issues their whole life, that's when I feel it's clearer to say it's environmental, because they'll be like, well, you know, as a child, I was healthy. You know, they don't have that normal gap story of like, which I have the normal gap story of things I had going on as a child. And I also have
same with Lucie.
So it doesn't mean that it won't happen, but it's like, especially in those situations where I can see, well, you were fine and like, and then something's happened. So that to me, I'm like, okay, well, that's clearly environmental, whether it's mold or something else. Something's been turned on.
That's really interesting, actually, Elise, because that probably completely sums up what I'm trying to say. Maybe if you've had an overload from a young age, you know, at all the things that I talked about, the corn syrup, soy formula, and the processed food, and the
you were already at tipping point.
Yeah, and it all just rolls into one. Like, how do you probably haven't really ever felt good health. So, but if you've got a sudden onset of something, it's much easier.
Yeah. And so for my people that have had, you know, that lifetime of all of this, and that was kind of me, that's probably why I didn't realize it was mold. I had the lifetime of not terribly ill, but just all these niggly things that got worse as I got older. And so with those people, it's like we're doing gaps, which is what I'll always do with people anyway, unless I know they're in mold, we definitely want to get out of it. But it's always kind of gaps, healing, everything first. And it's when we're doing all of that and we can see healing happening, but then there's still something going on, which was like you, Joe. And that it's like, well, you've done all this healing. We can see things have changed. We can see how much your health has improved, but then there's still something, and it's not.
There's another piece.
It's chronic, and it's what's this piece. So that's when I would then go, environmental. So my clients that I've worked with for 2 years or more, when it's really hard to resolve, when we've seen improvements that GAPS brings with healing, but there's something else, that's when I start saying to them, like, we need to think about the environmental factors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
So you mentioned an air purifier before. That's something I've never really done or looked into. Is that something everybody should have?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think I'm in, you know, we're saying the same thing. You say, get out of it. That's your number one. If you're suspecting mold and you can get a specialist in who confirms that there's mold, you need to cut it out. You need to get it out of your life one way or another, whether it's you leaving the house or whether it's you cutting it out. I mean, in this renovation of this house, and we've really only just finished it because I was busy studying as I was doing it. And so I didn't want to go too fast because I wanted to implement what I was studying. We've had, since we finished it, we've had 3 water entries. Oh. And I just cannot, can't believe it. But anyway, one was from a radiator, and one was that came down through the pantry. One was from a burst pipe, because in Massachusetts we get a lot of frozen pipes. And this new anti-freeze, never freeze pipe didn't quite work where it was supposed to. I can't remember. One was from something else, but one was from an ice dam built up on the chimney breast, and came through my son's room. And in each incidence, I've basically had the emergency people in here, and everything has been cut out. And actually,
a lot of my clients say things about getting it treated, and I never think that's not a good idea.
Yeah, I honestly, studying for 4 years, I can't say that I have ever heard of a reliable way to treat mold, because essentially you kill it and it produces mycotoxins, from what I understand, which are sometimes even more damaging on the health than the mold spores themselves. I mean, I think you can definitely use some products to help, if there's, I don't know. I mean, I know that there's a thyme spray that even the mainstream emergency water repair people use here, that's made with a thyme oil. And I think that's just to prevent, I think that's not so much to kill the mold, but it's to prevent mold ever growing on the materials that they've built it with. But I think the key thing is to cut it out, one way or another, whether you leave or whether you get it out. And we've had, the guys that come here know our health history, and they're prepared to go 6 feet to the left, 6 feet to the right, 6 feet up, and make sure that, you're really getting everywhere that water could have gone.
One question I've got about water damage, and I think Elise, you might have first told me this, that basically if you have a water escape kind of situation, how long is it that if it's sitting, for instance, you've got a cabinet where the water's escaped into the cabinet under the sink, how long with it sitting in there that you don't know it's there before it's definitely going to grow mold? Is it just it's dependent probably on climate and a little bit and what's encouraging it, but mold can grow within 24 to 48 hours. That's the recommendation, is that it's done but within 48 hours. Of course, if any of these water things had happened when we weren't in the house, I wouldn't have caught them all. You wouldn't have known. And I luckily do know when these all happened, because I was here and they were pretty instant, but and they were dealt with within the first 24 hours. But very often you don't. And that's where building a house, or, and not everyone has the luxury of building a house, but building a house using materials that are mold resistant and, generally they're natural materials, not got paper on them, and all of that's where you're safest, because these things are always going to happen. And that's right. I mean, if you get a water leak and and your wall's made out of stone, that's no big deal. Right? But most of us don't have that. Yeah, that's why the houses in these islands in Sicily that have got spraying up on them all the time, they're made of a stone with a lime plaster and a clay paint, and all of those things
you can basically take a hose inside those houses if you want and have a party. And they'll be fine. They'll resist tiled floors and, radiant heating, stuff like that. So, I know that's hard because unfortunately conventional building has not gone that way, and it does not work in our favor at all.
Isn't it amazing how the more we know, like we seem to, we think that we progress and that we
think we're smarter, but we're dumber and dumber.
Exactly. And you look at all these places where they, still do traditional building, and it's basically what we should be doing and what survives. I mean, I remember looking at one of the slides when I was in Santa Fe. It was a picture of one of those, a wattle and daub house in Germany, beautiful black and white house in Germany, still standing from the 10th century.
Wow.
And they're talking about, that's basically wood with rammed earth and straw for the insulation, earth and insulation all together, still standing. And do you know what the life expectancy of a standard North American house is now? It's under 30 years.
It's like before you even pay your house off.
Exactly. But and that's how we feel here. It's like our house is only 12 years old and we're fixing so many things already. Yeah. And it's just like, what? Who builds these things like this? What's going on?
Right. Yeah. And the other thing is, and this is the thing that saddens me the most, because it's people that think that they're, doing the right thing. And that's what guts me the most, because you're like, oh my God, these people are doing this with the right intention. Yeah. There was a slide of these 3 kids going out to a playground. I think it was probably in post-war Germany, which is actually where the building biology movement arose, because they had to put up all this very fast housing for people.
Yeah, of course.
After lots had gone down, and they found that people were sleeping in tents outside, even in the middle of winter, because they could not cope with the indoor air quality inside the houses that they put up.
Terrible.
So that was literally how building biology, it's actually called Biologie in German, and that's the original name. That was how it was founded. But the picture was of these kids in this area going to a playground, and they were covered in this enormous plastic bag, and kind of a funny picture. But the question was, we don't do this to our children. Why do we do this to ourselves in our houses? And this is what's happened with this heavy focus on energy saving, which, don't get me wrong, I'm one of the biggest, climate people out there, but we're wrapping our houses up so tight with plastic bags and then trying to mechanically, ventilate them without anyone ever opening a window. I mean, I don't drive around any of the houses in my town and ever see a window open here.
I could not believe that when I went to America. We were there from the time I was 16 to 18, and we moved into a house and all the windows were nailed shut. And you would I couldn't believe I was in the country, Australia, and all the doors and windows are always open, even in winter.
Yeah, my door's open right now.
Yeah, I sleep with the door next to my bed open. That's how thankfully it's a screen, because there was a snake out there last night. But it's just crazy to me. And so we went around pulling all the nails out of the windows and ripping them up so that we could have the windows open. We had the front door open, and people would walk past our house and just stop and stare because our front door was open.
Because it was open, they think something was wrong.
They thought something was wrong. And
emergency.
And we'd have the garage door open, and we'd have the piano out there, and we'd be out in the garage playing and stuff. and we had kids say to us, "Oh, you're the ones that live in the house with the door open."
There you go. Well, we're the ones that live in the house with the window open.
Yay!
Or the window's open. And I mean, it gets flipping cold here, as you know, in Massachusetts. But I still, as long as the humidity is not too crazy, I still every morning run around the house, open the windows. And by the time I've finished opening the windows, I go around and I close them. And I've had an air exchange. Yeah. And I've had natural air exchange. And it's not a mechanical air exchange where I'm pulling in stuff under negative pressure through places that I don't want it to come through. It's coming straight in through my windows. It's clean-ish air, I hope. Not always. And not in the summer when there's lots of pesticide spraying going on. But yeah, it's, so here we have these, we're up against the multi-million-dollar green movement who are wrapping their houses up so that they meet all these energy codes and operating them through smart appliances and smart this and smart that, which is, letting off a massive amount of electromagnetic radiation. And so, yes, it's probably, it's debatable actually whether it is actually good for the environment, because if you think about it, they're having to, being forced or being suggested to use things like spray foam to meet the right insulation value, to meet the right energy saving criteria. But when you then wrap that in plastic and you're living inside it, you end up living in a, soup of toxins inside with no air exchange and crazy electromagnetic fields, because everything is being managed for you because it's too complicated. It's just too complicated for anybody to try and understand it.
And this isn't just in your home either, because then it's considering where your children are going to school and the place as well. Yeah. I know my friend just in her workplace, they just found all black mould all behind the fridges in this shop that she works in.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, and it's just so, it's like, where does it end when you're in buildings?
Right. Oh, that's the thing I find so hard. Like I walked into a chemist or, one of the big CVS or Rite Aid in town the other day, and I literally could hardly breathe.
Yeah.
And I thought, do I tell these poor people?
It's
do
funny.
I tell them that they're in this horrific toxic environment? And
I know, you just feel like they're going to look at you like a crazy woman.
Exactly. And you know what? Right now they're not sick, but they might get sick. And I don't want anyone to go down that path.
Such a long journey to heal.
Three of us have been down. Yeah. It's so long to grapple back and get health. It takes a long time and a lot of dedication and a lot of money.
I find it's funny. For a long time, I've really hated going shopping in malls. I feel like I'm in there for maybe an hour or half an hour and I start feeling really exhausted. And like, it's almost like I'm overwhelmed, that feeling.
I get that too.
Yeah. And I think, and cities is the same. Like, I feel like that, but especially in a mall with those fake lights and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned somewhere, I read something you'd written, Lucie, about fluorescent lighting. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit about how lighting also affects your environment?
So there's various areas.
Sorry.
Waves, I should say, that come into the electromagnetic spectrum. So we've spoken a little bit about the wireless radiation that comes from Wi-Fi's and cell towers and phones and stuff like that. And then there's...
You can go into more detail about that if you need to, if you like.
I mean, that would be what, my advice there would be that, so there's been a huge amount of studies done. It's hard to know how much detail to go into. I don't want to totally craze the listeners, but
they're pretty used to our crazy podcast. Don't worry about
it. There's a bio-initiative report that was put together in 2007, actually by a building biologist and a lot of electrical engineers and medical professionals. And I think there's something like, I know that they readdressed it between 2007 2011, and they added in 1,800 papers. So I can't quite remember how many papers there were to start with, but I think it's 3,000 something papers that prove biological harm from this kind of wireless radiation that comes from microwaves, cell phones, cell towers, and wireless routers, modems, etc. Smart meters that we now all have on our house to, so that the electrical companies can manage our electricity and figure out how we live our lives so that they can try and adjust it and, energy save again. And there are two studies, which are the two studies that I always tend to talk about. There was one that was funded by the FDA, and it was done by the National Toxicology Program. It was a $30 million paper trial that was done, that was basically the outcome was that they had, they looked at the brain and they looked at the heart of these rats. And there was clear evidence that under this low level of radiation, which is called non-ionizing radiation, so it's the radiation that doesn't, it's said not to heat the cells up. But of course, we all know that our phones heat us up, and you can, what is it, pop a popcorn from two phones together or whatever. But yeah, anyway, they carried out this amazingly big study that unfortunately kind of got brushed under the carpet because it wasn't really the results that the FDA were hoping for. They were hoping to prove that there was no correlation between this wireless radiation that's being rolled out without having been tested and any form of cancers. But they came up with this very clear evidence of cancers in the brain and in the heart, which were the only two. I only realized actually the other day that those were the only two organs they looked at. So they got 100% cancer rate in these organs. And then a big study came out of Italy recently, again, another independent study by the Ramazzini Institute, which came up with the exact same results.
Wow.
So these are two very important, huge studies that I think very clearly, if you don't want to look at the other 3,000 papers in the bioinitiative report, are very clear. There's clear evidence that this radiation that is now being put in everywhere, and we're about to get 5G, which is going to be on every third lamppost, has not been tried and tested. So that's where I go back to just turn your Wi-Fi off at night so that you can have a break. And, if you have a chance and you're renovating or you even have a chance to move kids around, don't have them sleeping near a smart meter, an electrical smart meter that's on the outside of the house. Even the smart meter companies have a disclosure which says you're not allowed to be within 20 inches of it. But of course, if you've got a kid sleeping
on a wall,
a wall sometimes is not as big as 20 inches.
No,
very often not. So, that's one big factor of electromagnetic radiation, which I think is becoming more and more a hot topic as we are about to roll out 5G, as we are noticing that there's a bunch of situations around the world where kids are getting very sick inside schools, and then they happen to realize, there's a cell tower on top of the school. So there's definitely, I think, a lot of momentum, hopefully, unfortunately not enough, but a lot of momentum on that form of wireless radiation. Then there's electrical fields which come off the wiring inside the house, and this is all down to basically faulty wiring. And we realized when we moved in here, the old part of the house, once I got my meters together and I was able to start measuring, I'm not an electromagnetic specialist at all, but I do the basic measuring. And once I did a little bit of measuring around, of course, I found out that there was a electrical fault in the wiring right down by my daughter's head where she sleeps. And without wanting to go in and rearrange existing walls that have been there. And this house is a very, very funny house. And we landed on a house, probably the only house in North America that's made with poured concrete walls and not stick construction, which is just crazy to me that, I ended up in a house like this, and then I started learning building biology because it's definitely a much easier house to manage than a conventional stick construction. But
you probably knew as soon as you're in it how much better you felt in it than others.
I guess maybe, right? There was something
intuitive.
Yeah. I thought it was the couple that owned it used to drive a beautiful Bordeaux Jag, and she had gorgeous Hermes headscarves, and the place looked like a little Ralph Lauren club, bar. I thought it was that, but maybe it just felt good too. So what we did, I actually got an electromagnetic building biologist specialist for a few $100s to come and do a comprehensive testing of the house. And she just said to me, listen, just get these kill switches. They don't work off wireless. They're like little analog kill switches that I have by my bed, and I can press on A, B, C, D, and I can turn off electrical circuits.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're amazing. They literally cost me $200 to get these little kill switches and have them installed.
So you just turn them off every night?
And so I turn off all. I mean, it's basically a lazy way of going down to your electrical
box and turning the mains off.
Just go to your electrical panel. But if I'm in bed and you know, whatever,
you need the toilet and you need to turn it back on.
Yeah, or you want to turn it on in the middle of the night because you want light and you're worried, like me, that there's a boogeyman in the house. So yeah, I have it by my bedside, and so the kids sleep every night without any electrical current around their heads.
So good.
So good. And that's kind of and honestly, if I told you the amount of times that I've heard of people, you know, from our house is 1947, but even new houses, you know, a friend of mine built a house 10 years ago, and she was quite conscious about all of this stuff, and the wiring is not right in that house either.
Wow.
So that's a really good tip to. And you guys are quite lucky. You've got quite a few. I think you've got quite a few building biologists.
Yeah, we do. I've interviewed Nicole
over here.
Yeah, I've interviewed the sort of the head building biologist here, Nicole, and I'll link to that podcast in the show notes so people can go and listen to that one as well.
Because she does the course as what she teaches. The course, trains.
Great. Amazing, and she's written a really good book.
Healthy my friend has done her course, and apparently it's very rigorous. Like,
I've got a friend doing it at the moment, and it's so full on.
Yeah, I had a question. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, go.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to know: have you, like, in your research, what have you seen about when people have been exposed to EMFs? Like, we used to live right near a phone tower, probably 100 meters, maybe 150 meters from one.
Right.
When you've been exposed to it, is the damage forever? Like, can it be reversed? Do we know that?
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will continue this podcast next week. We have a whole nother hour for you, and it gets really practical, so don't miss it. Bye.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.